A woman's body was found hanging from a haystake in a farm field on the morning of December 21, 1832. The cord was knotted about her neck. Her shoes had been removed and set upon the frozen ground to her right. Her toes touched the earth below her. The man who found her was John Durfee, a farmer of Tiverton, Rhode Island. He was driving his team through the stackyard beside his house when he noticed her. He sent at once for a physician and for a Methodist minister, who came and identified the woman. Her name was Sarah Maria Cornell. She was 29 years old. She had been employed at the Anawan Mill in Fall River, Massachusetts. The city of Fall River in that year sat at the base of a granite ridge where the Quecachin River emptied into Mount Hope Bay. In the decades following the War of 1812, textile manufacturing had transformed the town. Brick mills of 5 and 7 stories lined the water channels. Each was capped with a belfry. Each was attended by rows of company boarding houses, their shutters painted green. Young women from the farms of Vermont and Connecticut filled the looms. They worked 12 hours a day. They were paid by the yard. In a full day of good health, a worker could earn 65 cents. Sarah Cornell had entered that world by a long and unsettled path. She was born in Rupert, Vermont in 1803. She was placed in apprenticeship as a seamstress at age 12 in Norwich, Connecticut. She moved from town to town across southern New England, Jewett City, Dorchester, Slatersville, Lowell, working in cotton mills and boarding houses. She was dismissed from several positions. She was expelled from at least 2 Methodist congregations. The Methodist Church was significant to her. She sought membership repeatedly, even after each expulsion. The church governed much of social life in the mill villages. A woman in good standing could find employment, lodging, and community through it. A woman expelled from it faced consequences in all 3. In October of 1830, while employed at the mills in Lowell, Massachusetts, she was expelled a second time. The minister who read her out of the congregation was the Reverend Ephraim Kingsbury Avery, stationed that year on the Lowell circuit. His stated grounds were theft and lewdness. 2 years passed. By the autumn of 1832, Cornell had taken a room at the house of a woman named Hathaway in Fall River. She was working the looms at the Anawan Mill. She attended Methodist services without formal membership. In September, she traveled to a camp meeting held by the Methodists at Thompson, Connecticut. Avery was present as a circuit minister. Her brother-in-law, Grindal Rawson, later swore in court that Cornell had given him a detailed account of what occurred there. According to that testimony, Avery had offered to destroy the letters of confession that kept her from the church, on the condition that she comply with his demands. Rawson testified she had agreed. In late November, she consulted a physician in Fall River. She was pregnant. She told the doctor the father was a married man. She gave his name as Avery. On the afternoon of December 20th, she left the Hathaway house. She did not return. The following morning, Durfee found her in the stackyard. The coroner's jury convened that same day. The jury noted her bent knees, her placed shoes, the quiet arrangement of her person. They returned a verdict of suicide, stating she had been influenced by the wicked conduct of a married man. She was buried in Tiverton. 2 days after burial, a folded slip of paper was discovered inside a bandbox among her personal effects at the Hathaway house. It was written in pencil, in her own hand. "If I should be missing, inquire of the Reverend Mr. Avery of Bristol. He will know where I am." Durfee took the note to the authorities. The body was ordered exhumed. The body of Sarah Cornell was exhumed from the ground at Tiverton. A physician named Dr. Thomas Wilbur performed the post-mortem examination in John Durfee's barn. His findings were entered into record. Cornell had been approximately 5 months pregnant. There were marks upon her person indicating that a violent attempt at termination had been made prior to her death. The medical evidence did not support a conclusion of self-suspension. A second coroner's jury was convened. It returned a verdict accusing the Reverend Ephraim Kingsbury Avery of being the principal or accessory in her death. A warrant was issued for Avery's arrest. He was brought before a justice of the peace in Bristol, Rhode Island. A preliminary hearing was held. It drew attending crowds and was reported in the papers. At its conclusion, the presiding justice found the evidence insufficient to hold Avery for trial. He was released. The decision was noted with dissatisfaction in Fall River and the surrounding mill towns. The result was disputed. John Durfee, the farmer who had discovered Cornell's body, refused to accept that outcome. He convened a committee of vigilance. A formal complaint was sworn out and filed before a magistrate in Newport. Avery, informed that a new warrant was being prepared, left Bristol without notice. He was traced to the town of Rindge, New Hampshire. The sheriff of Bristol County pursued him. Avery was found and arrested in Rindge. He was returned to Rhode Island in the custody of the law. He was indicted by a grand jury and remanded for trial before the Supreme Judicial Court of Rhode Island. The charge was murder in the first degree. Newspaper presses across New England had been attentive to the matter since December. By the spring of the following year, the case had drawn coverage from papers in Providence, Boston, and New York. Pamphlets were printed and sold. Broadsheets carrying verse condemning Avery circulated in the mill towns. One printed illustration depicted the stackyard at Tiverton. Another rendered Cornell's portrait above a poem of lamentation. The press framed the matter as a contest between the mill workers and the clergy. The trial opened at Newport, Rhode Island, on the 6th of May. The presiding judges were 3 in number. More than 100 potential jurors were examined before 12 were seated. Public feeling had run to such a pitch that impartiality was difficult to establish. 196 witnesses were called over the course of the proceedings. The trial continued for 27 days, an unusually long duration for a criminal case of that period. The prosecution opened its case with the note. The paper found in Cornell's bandbox, written in her hand, directing inquiry to Avery by name. The prosecution argued the note was a precaution she had taken before meeting him, not an act of suicidal despair. Her comb had been found broken some distance from the body, inconsistent with a calm self-suspension. The cord about her neck was tied in a clove hitch. It was a knot used by sailors and riggers. It was not a knot commonly associated with self-inflicted hanging. A laboring man named Benjamin Manchester testified that on the evening of December 20th, he had been blasting rocks near the stackyard. He observed a tall man in a long dark coat and wide-brimmed hat walking toward the field. He could not positively identify the man. A second witness, William Hamilton, stated he had heard a woman cry out in that vicinity near the same hour. Grindal Rawson took the stand. He was Cornell's brother-in-law. He testified that some weeks before her death, Cornell had described in specific detail what she said occurred at Thompson, the date, the terms Avery had set, and the consequence she had not foreseen. The prosecution rested on the theory that the note, the knot, and Rawson's testimony together established the minister's presence, motive, and act. The defense opened by challenging the character of Sarah Cornell. Witnesses were called to describe her past expulsions from the Methodist congregation, her wandering employment record, and what her counsel characterized as a disposition toward false accusation. The letters of confession she had written to the church, documents that had kept her from membership in any congregation, were read into the record. Her history of dismissal and reinstatement was laid before the court in full. Defense counsel argued the physical evidence was consistent with suicide. Medical testimony was offered in support of the proposition that hanging was a frequent means of self-destruction and required no particular knowledge or skill. The defense challenged the identification of Avery as the man seen near the stackyard. They disputed the credibility of Rawson's testimony. They produced witnesses from the camp meeting at Thompson who contested the dates and sequence that Rawson had described under oath. The jury retired on the evening of June 1st. They deliberated through the night. On the afternoon of Sunday, June 2, 1833, they returned to the courtroom. Their verdict was entered into the record, not guilty. The Reverend Ephraim Kingsbury Avery was discharged. The response in Fall River was immediate. The mill workers of the Anawan and surrounding factories had followed the proceedings by newspaper throughout the 27 days. When the verdict reached the town, public meetings were called. Effigies identified as Avery were hung from poles and burned in the streets. The local press received formal letters of protest. He was nearly set upon by a crowd in Boston not long after his release. Printed pamphlets condemning the verdict circulated across New England. Pamphlets of vindication were issued by supporters in reply. Reports had appeared in print, unverified but widely circulated, that one of the presiding justices held a connection to the Methodist fellowship and had directed proceedings to protect the church from public scandal. No formal inquiry was opened on that matter. It was not the first occasion in that period when the social standing of a clergyman had been placed in contest against the sworn account of a laboring woman. The trial record does not resolve how that disparity was weighed when the jury retired. The case generated more pamphlet literature in New England than any other criminal proceeding of its decade. Several book-length accounts appeared within months of the acquittal, each presenting a differently arranged sequence of the same documented facts. The Methodist Church's New England Conference convened its own internal proceeding shortly after the verdict. It was chaired by the Reverend Wilbur Fisk. Avery was again found not guilty of any offense. He was reinstated to his ministerial post. He returned to Bristol. The public hostility followed him. He preached to diminished congregations. Within 2 years of the acquittal, he had left the ministry entirely and removed himself from Rhode Island. He settled in Pittsfield, Ohio, in the Western Reserve. He took up farming. His neighbors there found no cause to regard him with suspicion. He lived without further public notice. Ephraim Kingsbury Avery died in Pittsfield, Ohio, in October of 1869, 37 years after the afternoon in Tiverton that had determined the course of his remaining life. No other person was ever charged or tried for the death of Sarah Maria Cornell. The inquest record, the note in her handwriting, the physician's reports, and the full trial transcript survive in Rhode Island and in the holdings of New England University libraries. The stackyard on Durfee's farm is gone. The mills where she worked have been converted or demolished. She was 29 years old. She had worked the looms in 6 mill towns across 3 states. She left a note that named the man she expected to meet on the evening she died. The note was entered into the record. The record has endured.